Hi, thanks for joining us today out in the garden. Today we are going to be fertilizing, talking about when to fertilize, and what needs to be fertilized, and how much. So I have Heather here today giving me a hand. Say hi, Heather.
Hi
So
there.
Heather is starting off with our lovely sun gold cherry tomato plant. You can see some beautiful sun gold tomatoes in here, gorgeous gold color. And then we have lots of others that are green and still ripening. So let's talk about a little bit about what's been going on with the tomatoes right now, and then we'll talk about fertilizing them. So first of all, we have had almost 3 weeks where it has gone down into the 50s every single night. And as we know, our tomatoes and our peppers are heat-loving plants. So in Florida, we're really fortunate. We can continue to grow tomatoes and peppers throughout the fall and winter season, but they kind of slow down when they hit a cold patch like that when it's down in the 50s, and then they're going to speed back up again. Now, this week, the lowest we're getting is mid-60s, and we're getting up into the 80s during the day. So our tomato plants are all going to bounce back. So if you've noticed that you have a lot of green tomatoes on your plant, what I like to do is go ahead and harvest 50% of those green tomatoes that are of size, because you know they are going to ripen on your countertop within 2 weeks. So that's going to help kick these tomato plants back into gear for production and get you the best yield and best harvest that you can, even though we're going through these cold snaps. Okay, so that's how you take care of your tomatoes. We haven't gotten any frosts or freeze yet this year. We haven't needed to cover them or anything like that just yet. Okay, so it is time to fertilize. Now, the fertilizer that we use is all organic. It's a well-balanced fertilizer, and we need to fertilize every 3 to 4 weeks. But always read the instructions, because it's different for every fertilizer based on the formulation, whether it's organic or not. So please be sure to utilize your instructions. But for us, it's every 4 weeks. With the tomato plants, anything that's large and produces a vegetable or a fruit is going to require more fertilizer, okay? So we like to mix our fertilizer in with worm castings and then just put a nice, beautiful layer around the base of the plants. Now, since we use the principles of square foot gardening, I'm not only interested in fertilizing around the drip line of my plant, I'm interested in fertilizing every inch of my garden, because next week I might put some radishes right here. I could utilize any inch of this garden at any time. So when I fertilize, I make sure that I'm prepared for that. Now with the tomato plants, we'll put more fertilizer with greens and herbs like our parsley that's here. We do about half as much or less as you would for a tall plant. And just remember, because it's only producing a leaf and it's not producing veggies, that's the reason that it needs less. And so that's how you judge with your greens and your herbs, how much to fertilize to provide for them each season, as well as these are our scallions. Those require, of course, much less than, say, a tomato plant or a pepper plant would. Then I want to bring you over here to this garden. We have our lovely purple cabbage that is ready for harvest today. And the way that you can tell when a cabbage is ready to be harvested is when you touch it, it's going to be really firm. Now this guy, he's a little bit small. We've had some ups and downs in weather, and that can be a result of that, but it's still gonna be delicious. So when I squeeze it, it's nice and firm. You wanna have only a 1/4 inch of give when you press your finger down in. And that's how you tell when the cabbage is ready. So we're going to harvest him today at the base and just remove him just in time to plant our round 2 cabbages and get another whole round for the season, because we're really smack dab in mid-season right now. So that's great news. He's right on time. So I've got my trusty bucket of fertilizer here. So for the cabbage plant, again, when I'm fertilizing, and he's going to get replaced, but just so you see, based on the size of the plant, I'm definitely going to put a thicker layer of fertilizer and worm castings. And you know what else I included in here is some blood meal, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. And then you see I'm doing a much thinner layer around my greens. And you can use your spade, you can use your hand, you know, whatever is easier for you and you feel like you have better control. Okay, so you can kind of see the difference here. Now I'm going to go through and fill in all of the empty spaces, but I just wanted to give you an example. And you have to remember, like with tiny plants like this lettuce, look at how tiny his roots must be. If I just fertilize around here, that's never going to get to him. So we need to make sure, you know, we're not interested in fertilizing the base of the stem of any plants, but we are interested in getting that right around through to the drip line. See, for this guy, to make sure he's got those nutrients that he needs. And look how many greens we're going to have here in a few weeks. It's 4 heads of lettuce per square foot, okay? Now what I really want to get to is these carrots. Now when you're gardening in an elevated garden, you need to be aware and mindful, especially with your root veggies, that the only fertilizer they're going to get is what you put into the garden. So if you come out to your garden and you're like, well, last week these were the same height, why have they stalled? Generally the issue is going to be a lack of nutrients. And if I'm fertilizing and I just go through and kind of sprinkle some in here, there's no way that is going to be enough to effectively produce a carrot. So what I really need to do, now I've got rows here, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's 4 rows of 4. So I'm grabbing my handful of fertilizer and worm castings mixture, and I'm coming right in here and I am just making sure that I go in between all of my rows and get a really good layer of nutrients in there, because these are all the nutrients these carrots are going to get. And you know, I really feel like for the last week they've been stalled, so I need to make sure they stay on time for this growing season, because I need to get a second round of carrots out of this garden. We need to get these babies moving, okay? So pay attention and let your veggies talk to you. And if anything has been stunted, you want to first address, has there been an issue with the weather? You want to get down to the root cause of the issue so that you can resolve it. It's either an issue with sunlight, it's an issue of changing temperature, or an issue with the weather, or an issue of nutrients. It really just comes down to a few things. So if you put your investigator hat on and try to figure it out, I'm sure you can get to the bottom of it with just paying a little bit of attention to the garden and knowing those key things to look for, okay? So I want to tell you a couple more things. We've got our celery growing right here, and as you can see, the celery gets quite unruly. We need to remember, when we're growing with principles of square foot gardening, everything needs to stay in its space, okay? So my celery over here is growing into my radishes. So I'm gonna prune that whole edge right there so that my radishes are able to get full sun. You see how good they're doing down there? They can't be blocked by that celery. They need to have full sun. So I'm gonna cut right across there to keep the celery in its space. Okay, so let's go back to fertilizing now. And I wanted to tell you about why I added blood meal to the fertilizer as well. So we know about our macronutrients. It's on every fertilizer bag. We've got nitrogen, we've got phosphorus, and we've got potassium. And you can, and those are the 3 numbers that are on the front, the N, the P, and the K, right? So when you utilize a nice, well-balanced fertilizer that's intended for a veggie garden, you need to kind of keep in mind the time of season. So what we did is we planted a lot of really small plants that have grown, and we're on round 2. Like for this cabbage, our green cabbage, we're on to our round 2. And so because of that, we've utilized a lot of the nutrients in the soil, but an excessive amount of nitrogen. Because what does nitrogen do? Nitrogen makes our plants grow tall. So at this time of the season, it is very common for gardens to be lacking in nitrogen. So you can just do a very easy at-home self-soil test for your garden, get an idea of where you are, And then when you're doing your next fertilizing treatment, add some organic blood meal to the mix, and that's going to give you that extra nitrogen boost that you need to really get everything leveled out for the second half of the season. All right, well, thanks for joining me out here in the garden today. Let me know if you have any questions about fertilizing. I'm Amber Harmon with Sun Gold Gardens, helping you grow your own.